Hey, you forgot to wire my $3,000 for living expenses. Do you want me to divorce you or what? My husband's rough voice echoed out of the smartphone speaker, bouncing creepily off the dark, narrow walls of my business hotel room in Boston. Outside the window, a cold autumn rain soaked the concrete sidewalks and streetlights. I sat on the edge of the bed, quietly staring at the illuminated screen. My husband truly believed he held the upper hand in our relationship. He was convinced that I was terrified of spoiling his mood more than anything else in the world. But he had no idea that his arrogant demand would be the final blow that shattered his comfortable life into a million pieces. Are you listening to me, Corinne? Answer me. Landon's voice grew louder, irritated by my silence. I'm listening, Landon, I replied, suppressing my emotions to keep my voice as level as possible. If you're listening, then speak up. You always do this. How many times have I told you not to go silent when I'm talking to you? That pathetic attitude is exactly why you're still just a mid-level account manager at your firm. I could hear him click his tongue in disgust over the line. In the past, that sound alone would have sent a sharp stabbing pain through my stomach. But today, I felt a strange absence of pain. Only a cool, quiet breeze seemed to blow through my heart. $3,000 for living expenses, right? That was our monthly allowance rule. But the reality of that money was vastly different from how a normal American household operated. Landon, what exactly do you use that $3,000 for? I asked quietly. Landon scoffed. What do I use it for? Rent, utilities, my groceries, and incidentals, obviously. Who do you think holds down the fort while you're running around on business trips? A man has to maintain his professional network. As a freelance consultant, it takes a solid expense account to build real connections in New York. You don't understand how business works, which is why you'll never be anything more than a corporate drone. Landon was a self-proclaimed freelance business consultant. He used to work for a major financial firm, but he left years ago after a series of interpersonal conflicts. After that, he claimed he was starting his own boutique consulting agency, but he barely had any clients. Every now and then, he would help out an acquaintance and bring home a meager fee of a few $100s. In reality, our entire household was supported solely by my income. Despite this, Landon's ego was higher than the Empire State Building. You are my wife, so it's your duty to support your husband's career. When I make it big, you'll reap the rewards too. Investing your money in me now is what a smart wife does. That was Landon's favorite lecture. For the first few years, I tried my hardest to believe him. I hoped that one day he would regain his confidence and return to a steady career, but that hope was quickly betrayed. The allowance Landon demanded from me increased year after year, eventually reaching $3,000 a month, taking up the vast majority of my take-home pay. Furthermore, he never once gave me a clear accounting of how that money was spent. The bank accounts for our apartment lease and utility automatic deductions were all under my name. That meant the $3,000 I handed over to Landon every month was pure pocket money for his own personal entertainment. Landon, I'm in the middle of a business trip right now. I have a critical meeting with a major corporate client here in Boston tomorrow morning. I don't give a damn about some regional corporate client. What's more important, my living expenses or your petty little job? It's arrogant for a woman to be jet-setting around on business trips, anyway. You're sitting comfortably in a nice hotel room without even worrying about whether your husband has food on the table. Landon's words steadily escalated into outright abuse. There wasn't a single trace of the kind man I had once married. I stared at the screen of my smartphone, then looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the hotel window. My face looked terribly exhausted, but deep in my eyes, a steady light of firm resolve burned brightly. All right, but I don't have my security token with me, so I can't initiate the wire transfer right this second. I'll go to a bank branch during a break in my meetings tomorrow. Tomorrow? Just use your mobile banking app right now. You're completely tech illiterate. This is why you're useless at your job. Listen to me carefully. If that $3,000 isn't in my account by tomorrow morning, you know what I'm going to do. What are you going to do? I asked. Landon then howled triumphantly. A woman like you who can't even keep a proper home has zero charm. The only reason you get to be a wife is because of my generous heart. If you forget that debt of gratitude and disrespect me, we are getting a divorce. If a woman like you gets divorced at 42, you'll end up alone and miserable for the rest of your life. Imagine how pathetic you'll look. If you don't want that, wire the $3,000 immediately. Do you understand? The moment I heard those words, the very last thread of attachment in my chest snapped cleanly in two. I had endured his abuse over and over again because I didn't want to worry my elderly parents back in Westchester, because I cared about social appearances, and above all, because I still harbored a lingering feeling of pity for him. But I didn't need to do that anymore. Yes, I understand completely, I replied in a remarkably calm voice. Good. As long as you understand. Make sure I see that $3,000 in my account by noon tomorrow. If you're late, there will be hell to pay. With that, he abruptly terminated the call. A cold electronic beep echoed through the quiet hotel room. I placed my smartphone on the bed and let out a deep, long breath. In the returning silence, I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single legal document. It was the official copy of a court filing I had completed and submitted several days ago. Landon, you really don't see anything at all, do you? I whispered to the empty room. Outside the window, the rain had grown heavier, beating forcefully against the glass. Tomorrow, everything would finally come to an end. I powered down my phone and closed my eyes. As I anticipated the stormy events that were about to unfold, I felt an unusual sense of serenity. The curtain was quietly rising on my escape from 10 suffocating years of marriage, but the story wouldn't end there. Landon's reckless behavior the following morning would trigger a chaotic chain of events far beyond anything I could have imagined. The next morning, I woke up before my smartphone alarm even sounded. Gray morning light filtered thinly through the gap in the blackout curtains. A glance at the clock showed it was just past 6 o'clock. As I sat up, the hotel sheets rustled softly. My mind was surprisingly sharp. The harsh sensation of Landon's phone call from the night before still lingered in my ears. You forgot to wire my $3,000. Every time I recalled those words, a dry, ironic laugh welled up inside me. I am a 42-year-old account director working for a well-established supply chain management firm in Manhattan. Assigned to the corporate sales division, I had spent years steadily building trust with my clients. My working style wasn't flashy, but my reliability had earned me recognition, and I was now responsible for several of our firm's most critical corporate accounts. Landon, on the other hand, was 44. When we first met, he was a confident sales executive at a rival firm. I'm going to start my own firm and become an industry leader, he used to declare. His grand ambitions had seemed dazzling and attractive to me back then. However, just 3 years after our wedding, Landon's life began to derail. Citing clashes with his managers and disputes with his subordinates, he abruptly resigned from his firm. If I stay in a company with such an outdated corporate culture, my talent will be completely wasted. I still vividly remember the sneer on his face when he spat out those words. That was when his endless fruitless journey as a so-called freelance consultant began. He rented a shared office space claiming he was launching a startup, but without any solid business plan, he spent his days surfing the internet. Naturally, no steady income ever materialized. This is just the groundwork phase. Once a major deal lands, I'll bring in tens of thousands in one go. Landon repeated this mantra constantly, and I chose to believe him, supporting our household entirely on my own. Rent, utilities, groceries, insurance, and miscellaneous bills, everything came out of my paycheck. Not only that, but Landon began demanding large sums of cash every month to cover his social life and his supposed prestige as a consultant. That was the reality behind the $3,000 living expense allowance he had demanded the night before. My monthly take-home pay, even including performance bonuses, was roughly $5,000. Out of that, I handed $3,000 to Landon, leaving me with $2,000 to cover our High Queens apartment rent and basic utilities. Obviously, not a single cent remained for my own savings. I drained my modest pre-marriage savings, giving up on buying new clothes or even basic cosmetics for myself. Why did I obey him to such an extreme extent? Looking back now, it was the result of psychological conditioning, a textbook case of emotional abuse. Landon spat a daily stream of curses at me. You are truly incompetent. If I didn't guide you, you'd be fired from your firm in a heartbeat. At your age, with your looks, do you really think any other man would give you the time of day? You should be grateful that I'm still your husband. As he systematically stripped away my self-esteem day after day, my mind gradually went numb. I was convinced that everything was my fault, and that if I didn't work harder to support him, our family would fall apart. My parents in Westchester had noticed that something was terribly wrong. Whenever I visited them for holidays, my mother would look at my thinning frame with deep concern. Corinne, are you truly okay? Is Landon actually working? She would ask repeatedly. But I would force a fake smile and lie, saying, I'm fine, Mom. Landon is working really hard right now. I didn't want to cause my aging parents any unnecessary worry. And more than that, I was terrified of admitting that the life I had chosen was a complete failure. That hellish existence continued for more than 10 years. My mind and body were pushed to their absolute limits. Getting out of bed every morning was agony, and there were days when I locked myself in a bathroom stall at work just to silently cry. The turning point arrived 3 months ago. One evening, a notification popped up on the screen of Landon's iPad, which was sitting on the living room table. Normally, I would have ignored it, but the text on the banner caught my eye and froze my blood. Thank you for the gorgeous dinner last night, Landon. I can't wait for our weekend trip next month. Please make my allowance a little extra generous this time. The sender was a young woman named Brielle, a stranger easily a decade younger than my husband. My mind went completely blank. The $3,000 I had sacrificed my sanity, my savings, and my entire life to hand over to him every month wasn't being used for startup capital or professional networking. It was being used to fund an affair with a younger woman and buy her lavish gifts. In that exact instant, something inside me completely shattered. I didn't feel sadness. I felt only an icy, calculating rage and a fierce resolve welling up from the very bottom of my soul. I would never give this parasite another single dime. I immediately went to work, operating entirely under the radar so Landon wouldn't notice. I laid out my preparations. I hired a professional private investigator to gather undeniable evidence of his infidelity, organized all of our financial records and bank accounts, and retained a top-tier divorce attorney. This current business trip to Boston wasn't just a standard corporate trip. For me, it was the perfect stage to bring a decisive end to my old life and take my first step toward freedom. The smartphone screen lit up on the nightstand, displaying a new incoming text message. The sender was Landon. You're awake, right? Wire the $3,000 the second the bank opens. If I don't see confirmation by 9:30, I'm calling your parents and spilling every single one of your embarrassing secrets to them. Let's see how much they enjoy hearing about their useless daughter. Stop messing around, you incompetent failure. If you don't wire it right now, I'm dumping all your personal belongings into the building's dumpster. Reading his text, a cold smile spread across my face. What a truly, endlessly foolish man. I stood up from the bed and opened the window. The crisp morning air flowed into the room. The rain had already stopped, and blue sky was visible through breaks in the clouds. It was the start of a brand new day. And for Landon, it was the beginning of his absolute nightmare. I dressed carefully in a tailored business suit. The woman reflected in the mirror was no longer the frightened, submissive victim of the past decade. Let's get started, I whispered to myself, opening the door to my hotel room. I couldn't wait for Landon's next communication. The moment he finally realized he was standing on the edge of a cliff was rapidly approaching. After successfully wrapping up my morning meetings, I walked out of my client's corporate headquarters into the crisp autumn air of downtown Boston. The sky was completely clear, and a refreshing breeze blew down the avenue. The negotiations had gone smoothly, resulting in a lucrative new contract for my firm. The professional accomplishment gave me a wonderful sense of confidence. However, inside my coat pocket, my smartphone was vibrating relentlessly. Checking the screen, I saw 15 missed calls from Landon, exactly as expected. Furthermore, my messaging app showed a stack of unread notifications glowing red. I walked over to a quiet bench in a nearby public park, sat down, and opened the messages. A barrage of insults that would be shocking to read out loud filled the screen. What the hell is your problem? It's already 10:30. The 3,000 still isn't in my account. Are you mocking me? If you're going to play these games, I have my own ways of handling you. I'm going to call your parents right now and tell them everything. I'd love to hear what they have to say about their pathetic daughter. Enough is enough, you useless piece of trash. If you don't wire the money right this second, I'm throwing all your stuff out into the street. I could practically see Landon's red, rage-filled face floating up from the text. The panic of not getting his money, combined with his frustration at my refusal to obey, was clearly wounding his fragile ego. I took a slow, deep breath and dialed Landon's number. The line didn't even ring once before he answered. Corinne, what the hell have you been doing? A deafening roar exploded from the earpiece. I instinctively pulled the phone a few inches away from my ear. I was in the middle of a critical client negotiation, Landon. A major contract was on the line, so I couldn't answer my phone. A job? You think some penny-ante regional business meeting is more important than your promise to your husband? Who do you think allows you to even have a career in the first place? It was the same intensely selfish, twisted logic as always. A man who lived entirely off my paycheck was casually dismissing my professional achievements. The absurdity of it made me sigh out loud. Landon, I earn real money through my hard work. It isn't penny-ante. That money is the only reason our household even functions. Shut up. You aren't earning anything on your own merit. You only manage to keep that job because I constantly mentor and coach you. Don't get arrogant, you absolute parasite. A parasite. I wondered if he genuinely lacked the self-awareness to see which one of us that word actually described. Landon's cognitive distortion had reached an entirely irreparable level. Well, did you wire the money yet or not? He demanded, unable to conceal his growing impatience. No doubt he had a date scheduled with his mistress. If he didn't secure a lump sum of cash immediately, he wouldn't be able to maintain his fake facade of wealth in front of her. No, I haven't wired it yet, I said flatly. What? Do you have any concept of how furious I am right now? Stop messing around and use your phone to transfer $3,000 to my account this instant. Right now. Like I told you last night, I'm out of town and I don't have my banking security token with me. I don't have time to visit a local bank branch either. I can't do anything until my corporate itinerary is finished. As I calmly stated my reasons, Landon let out a low, animalistic growl over the line. So, you really want a divorce, huh? Fine. I just gave your precious parents in Westchester an earful. A dark, malicious triumph dripped from his voice. You called my parents? Yeah, I did. I called your folks directly just now and told them, your daughter is completely abandoning her marital duties. She refuses to manage our finances properly, and she's out of town screwing around with another man under the pretense of a business trip. Take responsibility for raising such a useless daughter, and wire me $3,000 immediately. Landon laughed, sounding immensely proud of himself. Your old folks were trembling on the other end of the line. They were terrified of their daughter's scandal and apologized over and over again. How does it feel? How does it feel to humiliate your own parents? The moment I heard that, any lingering shred of human pity I had left for Landon evaporated completely. He had used my elderly parents as financial hostages, threatening and harassing them just to extort cash. It was an unforgivable act. Yet I didn't raise my voice in anger. Instead, my tone grew freezing cold. So you called my parents? Huh? Finally realize how serious this is? Even your own parents don't want to deal with a damaged goods like you. If you don't wire the money right now and beg for my forgiveness, I'll drain your parents' retirement fund to get what I'm owed. Landon's threats had officially crossed the line into criminal extortion. But he remained completely clueless. He had no idea that weeks ago I had already sat down with my parents, revealed the entire truth about his behavior, and helped them prepare for exactly this scenario. Landon, thanks to you calling my parents, I can finally take my next step without any hesitation. What the hell are you babbling about? Shut up and wire the money. Landon's irritation was hitting its absolute peak. He was expecting me to break down crying, apologize profusely, and scramble to find the cash, just like I always did. But my prolonged silence and detached demeanor were beginning to make him uneasy. Landon, you've threatened me with divorce countless times over the years, haven't you? Yeah, I have. A woman like you is garbage to me. Make sure you never regret those words, I said. Landon choked on his words for a split second. But his habitual arrogance quickly returned. And he launched into a desperate attempt to inflict maximum emotional damage. Regret it? Don't make me laugh, Corinne, he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. You're the one who's going to regret this. Take a good look in the mirror. You're a 42-year-old woman with a mediocre corporate job. What happens when a high-value man like me dumps you? Nobody is ever going to look twice at leftover trash like you. Every word pouring out of Landon's mouth was like a poisoned blade, carefully sharpened over 10 years to destroy my self-worth. In the past, those words would have crushed my chest, leaving me weeping and begging for his pardon. But today was different. I quietly checked the screen of my phone to confirm that my call recording app was running smoothly. I switched the call to speakerphone, ensuring that every single syllable of his abuse was captured in crystal clear audio. What's the matter? Dumbstruck? Too shocked to speak? It's obvious. You only manage to hold your head up in polite society because you're married to an elite man like me. Landon's verbal assault showed no signs of stopping. You have the intelligence of a high school dropout. You should be on your hands and knees thanking me for allowing you the privilege of paying my living expenses. You aren't a partner, you're my livestock. You're just a walking ATM, know your place. Livestock. An ATM. Even hearing those words, I maintained my deliberate silence. I said nothing, simply letting his shrieking rage record onto my device. Misinterpreting my silence as terror, his voice escalated even further, riding a wave of arrogant delusions. You work your pathetic job, you bring home the money, and I spend it having fun with a young, gorgeous woman. That is how the world is supposed to work. Unlike an old, wrinkled, boring woman like you, I have a young, beautiful partner who actually respects my elite talent. There it was. He had finally confessed to the affair with his own mouth. It was exactly as the private investigator's report had stated. The money I had sacrificed my youth and sanity to earn had been thrown away on luxury dates and designer gifts for his mistress. Unlike a cold like you, she genuinely adores me. Because you refused to wire my money, my reservation at a high-end French restaurant with her tomorrow night is about to get cancelled. Are you trying to humiliate me? It was always only ever about himself. My suffering, my exhaustion, the complete destruction of our marriage, none of it registered in his mind. His sole driving motivation was preserving his fragile ego and his fake wealthy persona in front of a younger woman. Listen to me. This is your absolute last warning. Wire that $3,000 to my bank account by midnight tonight. If you are even 1 minute late, I am dragging every single piece of your clothing and furniture out onto the balcony and throwing it onto the pavement below. Then I'm calling your corporate headquarters and telling your executives that you're a fraud who steals money from her own husband. Landon was panting heavily with excitement over the phone. Even if you come crying and begging on your knees tomorrow, it'll be too late. I'll sign our divorce papers, strip you of everything, and throw you out on the street. Your folks will be the laughingstock of Westchester when they have to take back a damaged goods like you. Landon's furious tirade finally came to a temporary halt, leaving him gasping for breath. Is that everything you wanted to say? I asked, my voice flat and icy. What? What the hell is with that attitude? You don't sound remorseful at all. I understand completely, Landon. I have received every single word you just said loud and clear. Then run to the bank right now. And don't be late. With that, he slammed the phone down, disconnecting the line. Sitting on the park bench in Boston, I slowly lowered the smartphone from my ear and hit the stop button on the recording app. There, stored safely in my cloud drive, was an audio file containing 10 minutes of criminal extortion, severe verbal abuse, and an explicit confession of infidelity, recorded in perfect quality. All the pieces of the puzzle are finally in place, I murmured, a small smile touching my lips. The heavy, suffocating fog that had hovered over my chest for a decade was clearing away all at once. However, the real battle was just beginning. Landon's threats weren't just empty rhetoric. There was a very real possibility that he would physically attack my parents' home, or begin destroying my property back at our apartment. I slid my smartphone into my purse and began walking toward my afternoon meeting. The Boston streets seemed brighter and more vibrant than they had just an hour ago. The chains that had bound me for so long were about to shatter completely. That evening, after finishing my duties for the day, I returned to my hotel room. The moment I walked through the door, my phone screen began flashing wildly. It was an incoming call from an unsaved New York area code. I cautiously pressed the answer button, and a young, trembling woman's voice poured out of the earpiece. It was someone I had never spoken to before, yet her identity was immediately obvious. Is this Corinne? It's an emergency. He's lost his mind. The voice on the other end was hysterical and disorganized. May I ask who is calling? I inquired, keeping my tone perfectly even. My name is Brielle. I'm Landon's partner. She hesitated on the word, but I knew exactly who she was. Brielle, her photograph and full name appeared dozens of times in my private investigator's dossier. I hadn't expected her to reach out to me directly. I know who you are, Brielle. What happened with Landon? He's completely out of control. When you didn't wire the money, he flew into a blind rage. He started screaming that he was going to drive up to your parents' house in Westchester and rob their savings account and valuables himself. Brielle's voice shook with genuine terror. I didn't want to get dragged into a literal crime, so I tried to stop him, but he shoved me to the floor, jumped into his car, and sped off toward Westchester. Landon had completely lost his temper and was heading toward my parents' home. Furthermore, he was intending to physically rob them of their financial assets, an entirely unhinged criminal act. Westchester County was an hour north of Manhattan, and from my hotel room in Boston, it was physically impossible for me to intervene. For a split second, a wave of cold anxiety washed over me. Brielle, thank you for informing me. I won't hold you responsible for his actions today, so I suggest you cut ties with him immediately and stay away. Yes, I swear I had no idea he was actually crazy. I'm so sorry. I ended the call and immediately dialed my mother's cell phone number. The line rang again and again without an answer. Sweat broke out on my palms. Please answer the phone, Mom. On my third attempt, the line finally clicked open. Hello? Corinne, honey, what's wrong? Why are you calling so many times? My mother's relaxed voice immediately eased my panic, but I quickly snapped back to the reality of the situation. Mom, where are you right now? Are you inside the house? Are the doors locked? Your father and I are just sitting in the living room watching television. The doors are locked, of course. Did something happen? Listen to me. You and Dad need to leave the house immediately. Go to the local police station or a public place right now. Landon is on his way there in a rage, and I don't know what he's going to do when he arrives. My urgent tone conveyed the severity of the danger. My mother gasped softly over the line. Oh dear. He called here earlier shouting the most horrible things. All right, honey. Your father and I are leaving right now. We'll get in the car and go. Please hurry. And whatever happens, do not attempt to speak to him if you see him on the road. After hanging up with my mother, I immediately called the local police precinct in Westchester County. I explained the situation to the dispatch officer. My estranged husband is in an agitated state and is driving to my elderly parents' home. There is a high risk of violence and property damage. I gave them the address and requested an immediate emergency patrol. Even after making the call, my anxiety didn't fully dissipate. I had ensured my parents' immediate physical safety, but there was no telling what Landon would do next. As if on cue, my smartphone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed the property management office of my Queens apartment building. Miss Mercer, we have a major emergency at the building. The property manager's voice was borderline panicked. Your husband is standing on your 15th floor balcony throwing furniture, clothes, and heavy boxes over the railing. Items are raining down onto the street below. Pedestrians were almost struck, and the entire block is in absolute chaos. We've already called the NYPD, but people are terrified. Just as he had threatened, Landon had begun destroying my belongings. I desperately wanted to shout into the phone, "Please break into the apartment and restrain him." But stranded in Boston, I was powerless to stop the physical destruction of my home. I bit my lip hard. "I understand. Please cooperate fully with the police and prioritize the safety of the residents and pedestrians. I am currently out of town on business and cannot return immediately, but I will be back in New York as soon as possible." I disconnected the call and slumped onto the edge of the hotel bed. My parents were fleeing their home, my apartment building was a chaotic crime scene, and my neighbors were being subjected to extreme danger. Thanks to Landon's complete loss of control, the foundations of my life seemed to be collapsing all around me. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. No matter how meticulously I had planned, a violent narcissist's unpredictable madness could easily spiral beyond expectations. Alone in a Boston hotel room, I felt an intense wave of isolation. It would take hours to get back to New York, even on the fastest express train. In that time, my childhood home or my Queens apartment could be completely destroyed. Yet I was no longer a helpless victim who simply cowered in fear. This chaotic spiral was actually the ultimate opportunity to permanently, legally destroy Landon's life. With trembling hands, I dialed one more number. "Hello, Mr. Pendleton? It's Corinne. It started. He's completely lost his mind and is acting out his threats." The man on the other end of the line listened to my report and replied in a calm, deeply authoritative voice. "Everything is within our acceptable parameters, Corinne. With these developments, we have gathered every final piece of evidence we could possibly need." The speaker was Arthur Pendleton, a veteran attorney specializing in high-stakes divorce litigation and civil torts. 3 months ago, when I first confirmed Landon's infidelity, I had dragged my exhausted, broken spirit into his Manhattan office. "Are you holding up all right, Corinne? Have your parents successfully evacuated the premises?" Attorney Pendleton's steady voice acted like an anchor for my racing thoughts. "Yes. I contacted my mother, and she and my father evacuated immediately. There is no one at the Westchester house now." I exhaled slowly as I spoke. "Excellent. Then even if Landon attempts a physical breach of the property, there is zero risk of harm to your parents. In fact, if he forcibly enters an unoccupied residence after being told to stay away, he elevates his actions from a domestic dispute to a straightforward felony burglary and criminal trespass." That was one of the secret safeguards I had established weeks in advance. Landon truly believed he could bully my parents and me into handing over cash whenever he pleased. But without his knowledge, I had constructed a comprehensive legal and physical fortress around my family. 2 weeks ago, I had sat down with my parents, presented the investigator's report, the financial audit of his drained accounts, and the recordings of his verbal abuse, and told them the entire unvarnished truth. My parents were furious and deeply heartbroken that they hadn't been able to protect me sooner. They pledged their unconditional support for whatever plan I laid out. "Corinne, you don't need to hold back against that man anymore," my father had told me, his voice trembling with controlled anger. "We will do whatever it takes to help you start your life over." Those words had saved my life. With their consent, we had immediately upgraded the security at the Westchester house, installing an ADT-monitored alarm system and high-definition exterior cameras. If an intruder breached the perimeter, private security and local police would be dispatched instantly. Furthermore, a week ago my parents had secretly packed their essentials and moved into a short-term rental condo I had leased under my maiden name in a nearby town. Whenever Landon came snooping around Westchester, he was simply harassing an empty, heavily monitored decoy house. "Mr. Pendleton, what about the legal filing? Was it officially entered into the court record?" I asked, my voice tight with anticipation. "Yes, without a single hitch. The paperwork was processed by the county clerk and signed off by the judge yesterday morning, exactly on schedule. Congratulations, Corinne. In the eyes of the law, you and Landon Holloway are no longer husband and wife. You are entirely divorced." Attorney Pendleton's words washed over my heart like cool water. Landon and I were already legally divorced. Landon was arrogant enough to believe that I was too terrified to ever leave him, but he had forgotten a critical incident from 3 years ago. During a massive screaming argument where he had threatened to throw me out, he had shouted, "A useless woman like you is replaceable. I'll divorce you right now." To prove his point, he had downloaded a standard New York uncontested divorce agreement and property settlement form, signed his name, had his signature notarized at a local pharmacy, and threw the documents at me. "Here, submit this whenever you want. I don't need you." He had completely forgotten about that signed notarized settlement agreement, but I hadn't. I had taken those papers and preserved them in a secure bank deposit box, waiting for the inevitable day when I would need to pull the trigger. Once the investigators secured definitive proof of his affair with Brielle, and once my parents were safely relocated, I handed those signed documents to Attorney Pendleton. Because Landon's notarized signature was genuine, and he had never filed a revocation, Attorney Pendleton submitted the uncontested divorce package to the court. The judge signed the final dissolution decree yesterday morning. In other words, as of yesterday, Landon Holloway was nothing more than a complete stranger to me. And right now, that complete stranger was demanding living expenses from his former wife, attempting to break into her parents' home, and hurling property off the balcony of an apartment he had no legal right to occupy. He was entirely blind to the fact that he was committing a series of severe criminal offenses against people who owed him nothing. "Everything is proceeding according to our strategy," Attorney Pendleton continued, his tone dropping an octave. "The NYPD is already on the scene at your Queens apartment building dealing with the property destruction. And the items he threw off the balcony were entirely from the inventory of decoy items we discussed, correct?" "Yes. The only things left in that apartment were my old thrift store clothes, broken furniture, and the cheap decorative items I bought to appease his ego over the years. My actual valuables, important documents, and family heirlooms were all moved to a secure Manhattan storage unit last week. Landon was frantically throwing items off the balcony thinking he was destroying my most precious possessions to punish me. In reality, he was simply hurling worthless junk into the street and systematically building an airtight criminal and civil case against himself with his own 2 hands. Reckless endangerment, criminal mischief, felony property destruction, and attempted burglary at your parents' residence, not to mention the audio evidence of extortion and domestic harassment we've archived. We have more than enough leverage to pursue maximum civil damages, and the district attorney will have a field day pressing criminal charges," Attorney Pendleton said, his voice ringing with professional certainty. "Hold on a moment. It appears Mr. Holloway has just arrived at the Westchester residence." Attorney Pendleton clicked his mouse. "The live security feed from your parents' home is being routed directly to my office monitors. He's standing on the front porch right now, pounding on the front door and shouting at the top of his lungs." I closed my eyes and listened to the steady rhythm of my breathing over the phone. Landon's absolute destruction had officially begun, but it would be a little while longer before he realized just how far he had plunged into the abyss. On the front porch of the Westchester house, Landon was beating his fists against the reinforced door. On the high-definition security footage routed to Attorney Pendleton's office, Landon's face was bright red with rage as he kicked the heavy wooden door with his dress shoes. The heavy thuds echoed through the microphone on the porch camera. He didn't care in the least about disturbing the peaceful suburban neighborhood. His inability to extort the money he needed had driven his narcissistic fury to a violent breaking point. "Open the door. I know you're in there, old man. Open up!" Landon screamed at the intercom camera. "What kind of degenerate daughter did you raise? She refuses to pay her husband his rightful living expenses, and she's off in another state sleeping around with a client. If you're her parents, take responsibility for her failures and pay me the $3,000 right now." Watching his hysterical tantrum on my screen, I felt only a profound freezing contempt. The man I had once loved had degenerated into a grotesque screeching parasite. There wasn't a single drop of sorrow left in my heart for him. Furious that no one was opening the door, Landon jumped off the porch and stomped around to the side yard, approaching a ground-floor living room window. He began pounding violently on the glass. "You think hiding inside is going to save you? I'll smash this window and take what's mine." The moment his fist slammed into the glass with destructive force, the perimeter security system triggered. A deafening high-decibel siren erupted from the eaves of the house, and a booming automated voice echoed across the lawn. "Warning. Perimeter breach detected. You are trespassing on private property. Law enforcement has been notified and is en route." Landon froze, startled by the sudden blast of the alarm, but his inflated ego refused to let him retreat. He sneered at the camera mounted under the eaves. "A security system? You think a cheap alarm is going to scare me off? I am the son-in-law of this family. I have every right to be on this property." Less than 3 minutes later, the wailing sirens of 2 Westchester County police cruisers pierced the suburban quiet, swinging rapidly onto the street and blocking the driveway. An ADT private security response vehicle pulled up right behind them. Several uniformed police officers leaped out of their cruisers, hands resting on their utility belts as they surrounded the side yard. "Step away from the window. Put your hands where we can see them. Move away from the house right now." A sharp authoritative command rang out from the lead officer. Landon blinked at the flashing red and blue lights, finally realizing that the situation had escalated. Yet, true to form, he maintained his arrogant, condescending attitude toward the law enforcement officers. "Hey, back off. I am Landon Holloway, the son-in-law of the people who own this house. This is a private family dispute. There's no need for the police to stick their noses into personal business." One of the officers approached him, his expression cold and unimpressed. "Are you Landon Holloway? We received an emergency dispatch from the property owners reporting an active trespasser attempting to gain unauthorized entry and destroying property. Pounding on windows and attempting to force entry constitutes criminal trespass and attempted burglary." "What do you mean, criminal trespass? I told you I'm family. Go inside and get the old man. Once I talk to my father-in-law, you'll see this is all a misunderstanding. The residents of this home have relocated to a secure location," the officer replied coldly. "Furthermore, the property owners filed a formal order of trespass with our precinct last week, permanently prohibiting you from stepping foot on this parcel of land. You are in direct violation of a standing legal order." "What? An order of trespass?" Landon's eyes went wide. For the first time, he realized that legal barriers had been quietly erected against him without his knowledge. "You are under arrest for criminal trespass and attempted break-in. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The officer stepped forward and grabbed Landon's wrists. "Get your hands off me. Don't touch me. I am an elite business consultant. I don't get manhandled by glorified security guards making minimum wage." Landon thrashed violently, jerking his arm away and shoving one of the police officers hard in the chest. That physical assault sealed his fate. Resisting arrest. Assault on a police officer. Take him down. The officer's movements became lightning fast. In the blink of an eye, Landon was swept off his feet and slammed face first into the damp grass of the front lawn. One officer pinned his shoulders while another snapped metal handcuffs tightly around his wrists. "Ow, my face. Let go of me. Corinne, this is all your fault because you didn't wire the money." With his cheek pressed into the dirt, Landon screamed my name again and again. I watched the entire sequence unfold in real time via the video link from Attorney Pendleton's office. Well, that's an airtight arrest, Attorney Pendleton noted calmly over the line. Criminal trespass, attempted burglary, and felony assault on a law enforcement officer. There is no legal maneuvering that will talk him out of those charges. Yes, it truly is the beginning of the end, I replied, letting out a long, shaky breath. However, the situation was about to evolve in a direction even I hadn't fully anticipated. My smartphone buzzed with another incoming call. The caller ID displayed the precinct number of the NYPD precinct that governed my Queens apartment building. Hello, is this Ms. Corinne Mercer? I am Officer Davis with the NYPD, the voice on the line asked. Yes, this is Corinne Mercer. Did something happen at my apartment building? Yes, ma'am. About an hour ago, a man identified as your husband, Landon Holloway, threw a massive quantity of furniture, heavy boxes, and clothing from your 15th floor balcony. Thankfully, no pedestrians on the sidewalk were struck, but a heavy wooden shelving unit landed directly on the hood of a custom luxury vehicle parked at the curb below. I sucked in a sharp breath. How severe is the damage to the vehicle? The front windshield is completely shattered, the hood is caved in, and the structural alignment of the front end is totaled, Officer Davis explained. The owner of the vehicle is extremely distraught and has already pressed formal charges for felony criminal mischief and reckless endangerment. Furthermore, the building management is filing a separate criminal complaint for severe damage to the building's exterior facade, landscaping, and iron perimeter fencing. Landon's destructive tantrum had gone way past a domestic disturbance. It had morphed into a high-stakes public crime with massive financial consequences. I understand, I told the officer. I am currently concluding my corporate business in Boston and will be boarding the afternoon Acela Express train back to New York within the hour. As soon as I arrive at Penn Station, I will come directly to the precinct. I ended the call, grabbed my briefcase, and checked out of the Boston hotel, heading straight for South Station. I boarded the quiet business class car of the Acela Express, taking a window seat as the train began its smooth, high-speed journey south toward New York City. The trip would take roughly 3.5 hours. As the train sped through the autumn landscape, my smartphone vibrated in my lap. The screen flashed the name Landon Holloway. I stood up, walked out of the seating area into the quiet vestibule between the train cars, and pressed answer. Hello? My calm voice blended with the steady hum of the train's wheels. Corinne, where the hell are you right now? Landon's voice was a frantic, ragged scream, stripped entirely of his usual overbearing arrogance, and replaced by raw, unadulterated panic. It seemed that because his assault on the officer in Westchester was considered a first-time offense without severe injury, and because he claimed it was a domestic misunderstanding, the Westchester desk sergeant had processed him, issued him a desk appearance ticket, and released him on his own recognizance pending a court date. He had immediately taken a train back to Queens, only to run headfirst into his next disaster. Everything is completely ruined because of you. I just got out of a police station in Westchester, and when I got back to our apartment building, there were NYPD cruisers out front, and the management locked me out. Why the hell did you leave all that garbage on the balcony? I was just trying to clean up the balcony, and my hands slipped. The boxes fell over the railing by accident. Landon was actually trying to spin a frantic multi-story barrage of thrown furniture as a simple household cleaning accident. Your hands slipped? I asked coldly. Do you really expect anyone to believe that dozens of heavy boxes, shelving units, and bags of clothes accidentally slipped over a 5-foot glass railing one after another? Shut up. Just call the NYPD precinct right now and tell them your husband was doing chores and accidentally dropped some storage boxes. Then get over to the car owner's house, get on your knees, and beg them to drop the charges. Even facing multiple felony charges, his immediate instinct was to force me to take the blame and clean up his mess while he remained blameless. The sheer breathtaking narcissism of the man was almost impressive. Never mind that. Where is my $3,000? It still hasn't hit my account. I had to pay for a cab from the police station, and my accounts are completely overdrawn. I have no money left. Landon's voice cracked with desperate hysteria. I want that money right this second. If you transfer the $3,000 and fix this police misunderstanding, I'll be generous and forgive you for today. Hurry up. My patience is gone. He was still clinging to the delusion that he was the master of our relationship. He genuinely believed that his threats of divorce and his angry demands would still make me cower in terror. Outside the train wind, the scenery of Connecticut flashed by at high speed. I leaned my shoulder against the cool metal of the train vestibule and spoke into the receiver with crystal clear precision. Landon, you don't need to worry about the $3,000 ever again. I am never wiring you another cent. What? What the hell are you talking about? Have you lost your mind? If you don't pay me right now, I am divorcing you today. I'll ruin you. I'll make sure your parents are publicly humiliated. Listening to his desperate, pathetic threats, I couldn't stop a genuine, relaxed laugh from escaping my lips. That's the thing, Landon. Your threats of divorce don't work on me anymore. Why? Because as of yesterday morning, our divorce was already finalized by the court. The line went dead silent. The only sound was the rhythmic clatter of the Acela Express speeding down the track. What? What did you just say? Landon's voice was a barely audible whisper, shaking with deep, genuine shock. All his aggressive bluster had vanished in an instant. Divorced? Stop lying to me. You can't do that. I never signed any divorce papers. You couldn't possibly file without my knowledge. He was desperately trying to reject reality. In his mind, it was a fundamental law of the universe that I would remain his obedient provider forever. But reality was remarkably cold. Landon, did you already forget what happened 3 years ago in October? I asked, watching my calm reflection in the glass of the train door. 3 years ago, during that massive argument in the living room, you threw a signed, notarized, uncontested divorce agreement in my face and shouted, "A useless woman like you is replaceable. I'll divorce you right now. Submit this whenever you want." Do you remember now? The Landon gasped, his breathing turning ragged as the memory resurfaced. That was just a bluff. We were fighting. You didn't file it then. So, I assumed you threw those papers in the trash years ago. I didn't throw them in the trash, Landon. I placed them in a secure safe deposit box, keeping them safe for the exact day I finally decided to erase you from my life. You can't do that. A stale settlement agreement from 3 years ago isn't valid. The court would need to verify my current intent. They wouldn't just accept it. Landon shouted, sounding like a panicked child. Actually, under New York state law, a properly executed and notarized postnuptial settlement agreement, an uncontested divorce affidavit, remains binding unless both parties formally execute a written revocation. Since you never filed a revocation or contested the terms, the documents were entirely valid. I recited the legal explanation Attorney Pendleton had provided me. Yesterday morning, my legal counsel submitted the complete package to the county clerk. The judge reviewed the notarized affidavits and signed the final dissolution decree. The judgment has been entered into the state registry. Legal counsel? You hired a lawyer? Landon's voice was completely stripped of power. Yes. A highly respected, aggressive civil litigation and divorce attorney in Manhattan. As of yesterday, my legal name is no longer Holloway. I have restored my maiden name, Corinne Mercer. You and I have zero legal relationship. You are a complete stranger to me. No. No, that's a lie. Corinne, stop playing games. Why are you trying to scare me like this? Landon was practically sobbing, trying desperately to escape the closing trap. But the terrifying shadow of ruin was already swallowing him whole. The $3,000 that magically appeared in his bank account on the first of every month was gone forever. The realization that his free ride was permanently over was causing the blood to drain from his face. I could hear the physical panic in his shallow breathing. That filing is illegal. I don't accept it. I'm going to sue you. I'll take you to court and get that divorce annulled. Landon screamed. Feel free to try. Anyone has the right to file a lawsuit, I replied smoothly. But Landon, filing a civil action in New York Supreme Court requires substantial retainer fees for a litigation attorney, court filing fees, and expert witness costs. Do you have $10,000 in cash just to retain a lawyer? Money? How much money is left in your personal bank account right now, Landon? After blowing thousands on luxury dinners, weekend getaways, and designer gifts for Brielle, your balance is probably down to a few $100s, isn't it? How do you know about Brielle? Landon gasped, sounding as if he had been physically struck. Your electronic messages, credit card receipts, and hotel bookings have all been thoroughly documented by a licensed private investigator. Attorney Pendleton has an airtight binder of your affairs sitting on his desk right now. I systematically blocked every single escape route he tried to envision. His ragged breathing echoed through the earpiece. He was finally beginning to understand that the trap he thought he was setting for me was actually a concrete pit he had jumped into himself. No money, no job, no wife. What do you have left, Landon? When I asked him that simple question, he couldn't form a single word in response. But his nightmare wasn't even close to finished. By the way, Landon, regarding our Queen's apartment building, the one you're currently locked out of, I began. What about the apartment? He snapped, his voice filled with paranoid dread. Whose name is on the master lease for that unit? Do you remember? Yours, obviously. You signed the lease. But we lived there together. That is my home. No, it isn't. Because I am the sole leaseholder. I am the only person with the legal authority to terminate the tenancy. And last month, I submitted a formal 30-day notice of lease termination to the landlord. What? You terminated the lease? Yes. The lease officially expired at noon today. Exactly when you were standing on the balcony throwing things into the street. That apartment ceased to be our home. It reverted to the landlord's possession. Are you insane? I never agreed to that. Where is my stuff? What happened to my belongings? I deliberately left behind the worthless items you might try to destroy in a temper tantrum. And just as I predicted, you threw them off the balcony yourself, committing felony property destruction and saving me the cost of hiring a junk removal service. You set me up. You manipulated me into doing that. No, Landon. I simply left old clothes and broken furniture in an empty room. You chose to pick them up and hurl them over a 15th floor railing into a public street. That was entirely your own criminal decision, executed by your own free will. My tone was calm, clinical, and completely devoid of empathy. I was simply watching a destructive narcissist self-destruct by his own hand. For your information, your actual personal items, your clothes, your paperwork, and the laptop you use for your consulting business, were professionally packed and moved out last week. They are currently sitting in a secure storage locker managed by Attorney Pendleton's firm. You stole my property? That is grand larceny. I'm reporting you for theft. It isn't theft, Landon. You are about to become an illegal squatter in a terminated apartment unit. My attorney simply secured your personal property to prevent it from being abandoned on the street. If you want your belongings back, you can visit Attorney Pendleton's office in Manhattan. Of course, when you arrive, you will immediately be served with legal papers regarding our financial settlement and civil damages. Landon was speechless. The place he considered his castle no longer existed in the legal world, and he couldn't even get inside the lobby. That's why your keys don't work, and the management won't let you up. Following my formal lease termination, the landlord had a locksmith replace the door cylinder at 12:30 today. Then where am I supposed to go? Where am I supposed to sleep tonight? Landon's rage collapsed into a pathetic whining plea. Why are you asking me? We are complete strangers now. Why don't you go book a room at a cheap motel somewhere? Oh, wait. You don't have any money in your account, do you? Corinne, how can you be so cold? How can you just throw me out into the street like a stray dog? He started adopting his victim persona, trying desperately to appeal to my sympathy. It was pathetic, transparent, and completely ineffective. Cold? Which one of us is cold, Landon? I asked, my voice dropping to an icy whisper that cut right through his whining. Who treated me like a slave for 10 years? Who called me an ATM and a piece of livestock? Who drained my paycheck every single month to buy designer jewelry for a girl 20 years younger than him while I wore 5-year-old shoes? My quiet anger vibrated down the fiber optic line. I don't have a single millimeter of forgiveness left in my heart for you, Landon. Not one. Damn you. Fine, I don't need you anyway. I have Brielle. I'll just go to Brielle's apartment. She loves me. She'll take me in and treat me like a king. Landon screamed, clinging desperately to his final emotional lifeline. To him, Brielle was the ultimate validation of his ego, the beautiful younger woman who adored his supposed success. But I had already demolished that refuge days ago. Going to Brielle's apartment? I strongly advise against that. Why not? Brielle adores my talent. She loves me for who I am. Let me share a little reality check about your girlfriend, Landon. You think she loves you for who you are? I let out a soft, mocking chuckle. She didn't love you, Landon. She loved the fake title you fabricated and the money you stole from my bank account. What the hell are you talking about? You told her you were a high-powered boutique consultant earning $500,000 a year, didn't you? You took my hard-earned $3,000 allowance and blew it on her dinners. You used my secondary credit card to buy her luxury handbags and shoes. You staged an entire life of wealth using my labor. That's just networking. A consultant has to project an image of success. Well, last week Attorney Pendleton sent a formal legal package to Brielle's apartment via certified mail. It included a notice of intent to name her as a co-defendant in a civil lawsuit for the receipt of fraudulently dissipated marital assets. A civil lawsuit? Landon's voice spiked with terror. Included with that demand letter was a comprehensive financial dossier compiled by my forensic accountant. It showed your actual tax returns, your complete lack of consulting income, your $0 bank balance, and undeniable proof that every single dinner, trip, and pair of shoes she received was paid for directly by your wife's corporate salary. She thought she had landed a wealthy Manhattan executive. When she opened that folder, she discovered she was sleeping with an unemployed, middle-aged parasite who was living off his wife's paycheck, and that she was about to be sued for thousands of dollars because of it. I had heard the details of Brielle's reaction directly from Attorney Pendleton. She had called his office in an absolute panic. I've never been so humiliated in my entire life. Being duped by a broke, middle-aged loser is the biggest stain on my reputation. She had screamed at my lawyer, weeping with rage at Landon's deception. That's a lie. Brielle would never say that about me. Landon sobbed over the phone. To avoid being dragged into a prolonged civil lawsuit over the spent funds, Brielle agreed to cooperate fully with my legal team. She signed an affidavit confirming all of your financial gifts and agreed to cut all contact with you immediately. In fact, when you threatened to physically attack my parents today, she was the one who called my hotel room in Boston to warn me. She threw you into the garbage the second she realized you were broke. Brielle, you sold me out? Landon screamed into the empty air of Queens. She didn't sell you out, Landon. She simply disposed of a piece of rotting garbage that had crept into her life. If you try calling her cell phone or checking her social media right now, you'll find that your number and all your accounts have been permanently blocked. Landon fell completely silent. From the other end of the line, I could hear the desperate rustle of clothes and the frantic tapping of a smartphone screen. He was trying to call Brielle, but the calls would never connect. A few minutes later, the line was filled with the sound of hyperventilating ragged sobs. He sounded like a man drowning in freezing water. Blocked. Everything is blocked. The messages won't go through. It can't be real. Brielle, please don't leave me alone. I could visualize him standing on the sidewalk outside our former apartment building, clutching his phone, completely collapsing into the dirt. His prestige, his marriage, his mistress, his free income, and his home, all of it had evaporated into thin air in the span of a few hours. Landon, this is the exact harvest of the seeds you spent 10 years planting. You stripped me of my dignity, treated me like an ATM, and abuse me every single day. This is your reward. Karen, please. I'm begging you. I was wrong. I was an absolute idiot. Let's start over. Please give me one more chance. I need you, Karen. I can't survive in this world without you. Landon finally threw his ego into the dirt and began begging for his life, weeping uncontrollably. But his tears inspired nothing in me, not even a spark of pity. You can't survive? That might actually be true, Landon. Because the isolation you're feeling right now is only the very beginning of what you have to carry for the rest of your life. As the train rattled through the Bronx, approaching the final stretch into Manhattan, I prepared to deliver the ultimate financial reality check, the blow that would permanently seal his fate. What do you mean, what I have to carry? Corinne, what else is there? His voice was a rasping, terrified croak. I'm talking about your legal and financial liabilities, Landon. I leaned back against the train door and laid out the cold, mathematical reality of his future. First, let's talk about the custom luxury car you smashed with the shelving unit you threw off the balcony today. Do you know who owns that vehicle? Who cares who owns it? Just submit it to your car insurance, or use the liability coverage on your corporate credit card. Pay them off. He was still desperately trying to spend my money to clean up his felonies. That's impossible, Landon. The owner of that car is Judge Harrison. He is the majority owner of our apartment building, a wealthy Queens property developer, and a retired federal district court judge. He is notoriously strict, brilliant, and deeply ruthless when it comes to the law. I heard Landon suck in a sharp, rattling breath over the phone. Judge Harrison is absolutely furious that his custom vehicle was destroyed by an unruly tenant. Between the shattered custom windshield, the structural frame damage, the specialized imported parts required for the repair, and the loss of use during a 6-month restoration, his attorneys are filing a civil tort against you personally. The preliminary estimate for property damage and depreciation is $80,000. $80,000? That's insane. I don't have $80,000. You were my wife when it happened, you have to pay half. It's marital debt. He was frantic, scrambling to chain me to his sinking ship. But I severed the rope with a single sentence. How many times do I have to explain simple chronology to you, Landon? We were divorced yesterday morning. When you threw that furniture off the balcony at noon today, we were legally strangers. That means the property destruction was a criminal act committed by an unemployed, single individual named Landon Holloway. I have zero legal responsibility, zero marital liability, and zero obligation to pay a single cent toward your criminal restitution. My head is spinning. This isn't happening. I won't accept this. That's not all, Landon. Attorney Pendleton has finalized my own civil claim against you for 10 years of systematic financial dissipation, emotional abuse, and marital infidelity. We have set the demand at $30,000. Given the overwhelming documentation, the audio recordings, and Brielle's signed affidavit, any court in New York will grant summary judgment in my favor in minutes. $30,000. Furthermore, we have audited every unauthorized charge you made on my secondary credit card to buy designer jewelry, handbags, and hotel rooms for your mistress. Because those purchases were made through intentional misrepresentation and weren't for legitimate household expenses, I have filed a formal fraud affidavit with the issuing bank. They are reversing the liability and initiating a direct collection action against you for unauthorized conversion of funds. That totals $15,000. Stop. Please stop saying numbers. And finally, Brielle is retaining counsel to sue you for intentional infliction of emotional distress and fraudulent misrepresentation, claiming you deceived her into an illicit relationship by fabricating your professional identity and wealth. Her initial claim is $20,000. As I calmly recited the figures, I could hear the physical collapse of his nervous system occurring over the line. 80,000, 30,000, 15,000, 20,000. That is a combined financial liability of $145,000. You are 44 years old, unemployed, have zero savings, and possess a criminal record as of today. You are going to carry that debt on your back for the rest of your natural life. $145,000. Landon repeated the number in a vacant, hollow whisper. His brain had completely short-circuited under the weight of the debt. How am I supposed to pay that? I'm a business consultant. I don't have that kind of cash lying around. A primal shrieking scream exploded over the line as he threw a violent tantrum on the street. I'll just declare bankruptcy. I'll file Chapter 7. Once I file for bankruptcy, all those debts get wiped out by the federal court. You won't see a single penny from me. I'll wipe the slate clean. It was the final desperate delusion of a cornered narcissist. But I was more than prepared to crush his last hope into dust. You really don't know anything about the law, do you, Landon? Under Section 523 of the United States Bankruptcy Code, liabilities arising from willful and malicious injury by the debtor to another entity, or to the property of another entity, cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. Furthermore, debts incurred through false pretenses, fraud, or intentional torts are entirely non-dischargeable. What? What does that mean? It means that felony property destruction, intentional vandalism of Judge Harrison's vehicle, fraudulent credit card conversion, and court-ordered tort restitution are legally protected from Chapter 7 discharge. Even if you declare bankruptcy, the federal judge will exclude those debts from the filing. Your bank accounts will be levied, any future wages you ever earn will be garnished at the maximum legal limit, and liens will follow you until the day you die. You cannot wipe this clean, Landon. There is no exit. Ah. A low gurgling sound rattled through his throat. The final door had been locked, welded shut, and sealed forever. He was trapped in a financial and legal prison of his own making with no possibility of parole. The automated PA system chimed through the train. We are approaching New York Penn Station. Please gather your personal belongings. My long business trip was over and my brand new unburdened life was waiting for me on the platform. Goodbye, Landon. Never attempt to contact me or my family again. Corinne, wait. Don't hang up. Help me. Please, God, help me. Ignoring his shrieking screams, I pressed the end call button. I popped the SIM card tray out of my smartphone, removed the tiny card, and dropped it into a station trash can as I stepped off the train. I inserted a fresh pre-activated SIM card with a brand new private number. My connection to Landon Holloway was officially zero, but the universe still had one final act of retribution waiting for him in Queens. Stepping out of Penn Station into the crisp evening air, the towering skyscrapers of Manhattan glowed with thousands of golden lights. Waiting for me near the taxi stand, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit with a relaxed smile on his face, was Attorney Pendleton. Welcome back, Corinne. I trust your corporate presentations in Boston were successful? He asked warmly, extending his hand. Yes, Mr. Pendleton. Everything went exceptionally well. We secured the contract, I replied, shaking his hand with a deep sense of gratitude. Well, it appears your personal house cleaning here in New York has concluded just as successfully, he said, tapping the screen of his iPad and handing it to me. On the display was a live status update from his associate, who was currently standing outside my former apartment building in Queens, observing the dramatic climax of Landon's day. Let's rewind the clock slightly. After I disconnected his call, leaving him standing on the pavement in absolute despair, a freezing autumn wind whipped down the street. Shivering uncontrollably, Landon stumbled back toward the entrance of the luxury Queens building. The sidewalk was still cordoned off with yellow NYPD crime scene tape, surrounding the shattered wooden furniture and boxes he had thrown from the 15th floor. Standing directly behind the tape were several uniformed NYPD officers, a police detective, and an imposing, well-dressed elderly gentleman leaning on a polished walking cane. That gentleman was Judge Harrison, the owner of the luxury residential building, a retired federal judge, and the owner of the custom Mercedes Maybach sitting at the curb with a caved-in hood and a shattered windshield. Landon attempted to sneak past the officers toward the building's side service entrance, hoping to find a warm place to hide, but the police were actively watching the perimeter. You there? Stop right where you are. Identify yourself. An NYPD detective barked, shining a flashlight directly into Landon's face. Several officers instantly moved to block his path. I'm a resident here. My name is Landon Holloway. I live in Unit 1502. I just want to go up to my apartment, Landon stammered, raising his hands in panic. Judge Harrison stepped forward, his sharp, piercing eyes locking onto Landon with the intimidating weight of decades spent on the federal bench. So, you are Landon Holloway. You are the individual who hurled solid wooden furniture from a high-rise balcony, nearly killing pedestrians on my sidewalk, and completely destroying my custom vehicle. And you have the sheer audacity to try and sneak back into my building? It wasn't me. I mean, it was an accident. I was out on the balcony organizing some storage boxes, and my hand slipped over the railing. The wind caught the boxes. You can't hold me responsible for an accidental slip. Landon desperately peddled the pathetic lie he had rehearsed. Judge Harrison let out a cold, sharp bark of laughter. What a thoroughly contemptible, transparent lie. The retired judge gestured to the property manager standing nearby, who held open a laptop screen displaying high-definition security footage. This building is equipped with commercial-grade 4K security cameras on every elevation. We have been reviewing the footage with the NYPD detectives for the past hour. The exterior cameras captured you clearly in high definition, intentionally lifting heavy wooden shelving units and hurling them over the glass railing with extreme physical force while screaming obscenities. Furthermore, several residents on the 14th and 16th floors submitted written witness statements confirming they heard you shouting, "I'll destroy everything she owns," as you threw the objects. Landon's jaw dropped open. Confronted with undeniable video evidence and multiple eyewitness depositions, his flimsy web of lies disintegrated instantly. This was no accidental dropping of household items, Judge Harrison declared, his voice ringing out with judicial severity. This was a deliberate, malicious, and highly dangerous felony act of property destruction and reckless endangerment in a densely populated urban zone. As a retired federal judge and the property owner, I have instructed the district attorney to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the penal law. Please, Your Honor. Have mercy. I was stressed out. I can't afford this. Landon dropped to his knees on the concrete sidewalk, weeping and clasping his hands together. My wife, Corinne. She'll pay for the damages. She makes a great salary at a Manhattan corporate firm. Charge her. You are referring to Ms. Corinne Mercer, correct? Judge Harrison replied coldly. Her legal counsel informed our management office that your marriage was officially terminated by judicial decree yesterday morning. Furthermore, as the sole leaseholder, she executed a lawful termination of the apartment lease effective at noon today. She has surrendered tenancy. You are not a tenant of this building. You are an unemployed, uninsured trespasser who has just committed a violent felony on my property. Officer, place this man under arrest, Judge Harrison commanded. 2 NYPD officers grabbed Landon by the arms, hauling him off his knees and forcing his wrists behind his back. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut echoed down the Queen Street. No, please. I am a high-level business consultant. You can't put me in jail. I'll lose my career. Corinne, save me. I'm sorry. I'll do anything you want. Landon screamed until his voice cracked, his cries echoing off the brick facades of the residential block. But not a single person looked at him with sympathy. The pedestrians and neighbors watched with cold, silent approval as the officers shoved him into the back of a marked NYPD and slammed the door shut. The cruiser's sirens wailed as it pulled away from the curb, transporting Landon Holloway to the borough booking center to face multiple felony charges. Watching the live video feed conclude on Attorney Pendleton's iPad in Manhattan, I felt a deep, steady calm settle over my entire being. The toxic weight that had pressed down on my shoulders for over a decade was permanently gone. An absolute masterpiece of legal strategy. Mr. Pendleton, I said, handing the tablet back to him. Everything was executed flawlessly. You deserve the credit, Corinne. My strategy only worked because you had the emotional strength and courage to stand up, secure your evidence, and reclaim your life. Attorney Pendleton said gently. Now let's head up to my office. We have some final settlement documents to execute, and then you can go meet your family. We walked together through the vibrant, bustling streets of Midtown Manhattan. The evening air was crisp and cool, but inside my chest, my heart felt warmer and lighter than it had in my entire adult life. However, the legal system had one final crushing revelation in store for Landon, a hidden truth from his past that would permanently strip away his remaining illusions. Inside the interrogation room of the Queens County Criminal Court holding facility, Landon sat slumped at a metal table. The man who had once swaggered around in designer suits, boasting about his elite status and treating me like an inferior being, was entirely unrecognizable. His hair was matted and greasy, his expensive suit was torn and stained with dirt from the Westchester lawn and the Queens pavement, and he sat shivering, staring at his handcuffed wrists. The heavy steel door clicked open, and Attorney Pendleton walked into the room carrying a thick leather briefcase. Accompanied by a court officer, he sat down across the table from Landon. Landon looked up, his bloodshot eyes widening as he recognized my attorney. He leaned forward across the table, rattling his handcuffs. You're Corinne's lawyer. Where is she? Why didn't she come to bail me out? Tell her to post my bail right now. If I stay in the cell another night, I'll lose my mind. Tell her to drop these ridiculous charges. Attorney Pendleton looked at Landon with a clinical, icy detachment, the look a scientist gives a biological specimen in a petri dish. He opened his briefcase and laid a stack of formal legal files on the metal table. Mr. Holloway, as I have already informed you, my client is Ms. Corinne Mercer. Your marriage was legally dissolved by judicial decree 2 days ago. She has zero legal obligation to post your bail, secure your release, or communicate with you in any capacity. In fact, she has requested an active order of protection against you. Attorney Pendleton's calm, level voice carried a weight that instantly crushed Landon's frantic demands. During our preparation for this litigation, my investigative team conducted a comprehensive background check into your personal, academic, and professional history. Attorney Pendleton continued, flipping open a folder. We discovered every single lie you spent the last decade telling Corinne, her family, and the world. Lies? What are you talking about? I am a graduate of a top-tier university and a former corporate executive. I quit my firm because the corporate culture was toxic. Landon attempted to inflate his chest, clinging desperately to his fabricated identity. Must you continue lying even when sitting in police custody? Attorney Pendleton sighed, pulling an official corporate document from the folder and sliding it across the metal table. Let's examine your departure from that major financial firm 10 years ago. You didn't resign to launch a consulting startup. According to the firm's internal investigation records, you were caught fabricating vendor invoices in an attempt to embezzle corporate funds. When the auditing department uncovered the fraud, you were given a choice. Face immediate termination and criminal embezzlement charges, or sign a quiet resignation agreement and forfeit your benefits. You fled the firm in disgrace to avoid prison. Landon's face turned the color of chalk. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Furthermore, let's look at your academic credentials. Attorney Pendleton slid a certified university transcript across the table. You routinely boasted about your elite degree from Cornell University. However, the registrar's records confirm that you academically suspended during your sophomore year due to failing grades and disciplinary infractions regarding student conduct. You never graduated. You never even completed your second year. You fabricated your degree. You fabricated your corporate career. And you fabricated your consulting business. You are by definition a career fraud. That's you had no right to dig into my private records. That has nothing to do with Corinne. Landon stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead. It has everything to do with Corinne. Attorney Pendleton snapped, his tone turning razor sharp. You systematically deceived my client into a fraudulent marriage, utilizing false representations of your earning capacity and professional standing to extort over $3,000 a month from her personal income for 10 years. That constitutes financial abuse and marital fraud under New York civil law. giving us overwhelming leverage to strip you of any possible financial pause, letting the silence hang heavily in the cold room before delivering the final, devastating blow. By the way, Mr. Holloway, we felt it was our ethical duty to inform your mother in New Jersey of your current legal predicament. My mother? Landon's head snapped up. Landon's wealthy, status-obsessed mother residing in an exclusive New Jersey suburb had always treated me with profound condescension. She had summoned me to her home repeatedly over the years to lecture me. My Landon is a brilliant corporate talent. You are a mediocre woman who should be grateful to serve as his wife. Work harder so you don't embarrass our family name. She had been Landon's ultimate emotional enabler and his final financial safety net. When our investigator delivered this dossier to her estate this morning documenting your university expulsion, your corporate embezzlement, your fake consulting career, your affair, and your current arrest for felony property destruction and police assault, she suffered a severe hysterical shock, Attorney Pendleton said. Her precious illusion of an elite son was shattered into 1,000 pieces in her own drawing room. What did my mother say? Is she hiring a defense lawyer for me? Is she paying my bail? Landon leaned forward desperately. Your mother instructed our attorney to convey the following message. I have no son. That degenerate criminal is a stain on our family heritage. I am removing him from my trust fund and my will immediately. Tell him never to call this house, never to write, and never to step foot on my property again. She has completely disowned you, Mr. Holloway. You are cut off from the family estate permanently. My mother disowned me? No. No, that's impossible. Mom would never abandon me. Landon buried his face in his handcuffed hands, his entire body shaking as violent sobs tore through his chest. The mother who had pampered him his entire life had locked her doors against him. His family, his background, his lies, and his future had been completely obliterated. Attorney Pendleton pulled a thick legal agreement from his briefcase and placed it squarely in front of Landon alongside a black ballpoint pen. This is the final civil settlement and release of claims drafted by my office on behalf of Ms. Corinne Mercer. By signing this document, you accept full personal liability for all debt incurred during the marriage, agree to repay the $15,000 in unauthorized credit card charges, assume sole responsibility for Judge Harrison's vehicle restitution, and sign a lifetime no-contact injunction prohibiting you from ever approaching Corinne or her parents. And what if I refuse to sign it? What if I fight this in court? Landon choked out, his eyes red and swollen. If you refuse to sign, my office will immediately hand our complete find me this, me that, and me this over to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, adding federal wire fraud and credit card fraud to your current indictment. Furthermore, we will pursue maximum civil tort damages in public court, ensuring your fraudulent history is published in every legal and commercial database in the United States. You will spend the next 5 to 10 years in a state penitentiary, and you will leave prison with a $250,000 judgment hanging over your head. Make your choice, Mr. Holloway, right now. Landon stared at the black ballpoint pen sitting on the metal table. The crushing weight of the criminal justice system and his absolute isolation pressed down on him from all sides. He had zero leverage, zero funds, and zero allies. Trembling uncontrollably, tears and mucus dripping from his face onto the metal table, Landon picked up the pen. With a shaking hand, he signed his name at the bottom of the settlement agreement, legally sealing his own financial and social ruin. The arrogant tyrant who had routinely called his wife livestock and an ATM was entirely gone, replaced by a broken, sobbing shell of a man. Attorney Pendleton inspected the signature, signed as the witnessing attorney, and calmly gathered his documents back into his leather briefcase. The execution of these documents is complete, Attorney Pendleton said, standing up and straightening his suit jacket. I am leaving now. I suggest you use whatever time you have remaining in this cell to reflect on the absolute destruction you brought upon yourself. Good day, Mr. Holloway. As the heavy steel door clicked shut behind the attorney, Landon Holloway was left alone in the cold, fluorescent light of the holding cell. He wept into his dirty hands, finally drowning in the dark, bottomless abyss of his own making. That moment marked the absolute, perfect conclusion to my 10-year nightmare. The man who had systematically drained my life had been executed by his own arrogant greed. Stepping out of Attorney Pendleton's Midtown office building, I took a deep breath of the cool New York night air. An incredible, soaring sensation of liberation and triumph surged through my veins. I hailed a yellow taxi and gave the driver the address of a quiet, upscale residential development in Westchester County, the secure, gated condominium complex where I had leased a beautiful new home for my parents and myself. The taxi pulled up to the manicured grounds of the development. I walked through the secured lobby, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and stood in front of Unit 402. I pressed the intercom doorbell. Almost immediately, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from inside, and the heavy oak door swung wide open. "Corinne! Oh, my darling girl, you're safe. You're home." My mother stood in the doorway, her eyes brimming with happy tears as she threw her arms around my neck and pulled me into a fierce, warm hug. Standing right behind her was my father, his usually stoic face softened by deep relief and pride as he placed a heavy, reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Corinne. You stood your ground and fought your way out. I am so incredibly proud of you," my father said, his voice husky with emotion. "Come on inside, sweetheart. Your mother spent the entire afternoon cooking your favorite comfort food." I stepped into the warm, brightly lit apartment, and the delicious, nostalgic aroma of a traditional American family dinner washed over me. Set out on the dining room table was a feast of my favorite childhood dishes. A tender, slow-roasted beef pot roast with carrots and potatoes, creamy garlic mashed potatoes, buttery green beans, and a freshly baked lattice crust apple pie cooling on the counter. Seeing that table prepared with such pure, unconditional love by the parents I had worked so hard to protect, something broke open deep inside my chest. The heavy steel fortress I had built around my heart for 10 years completely melted away. "Mom, Dad, it was so hard. It was so incredibly hard for so long." My voice cracked and tears finally began pouring down my cheeks. For the first time in over a decade, I didn't hide my pain or force a polite smile. I wept openly, burying my face in my mother's shoulder like a little girl. "I know, my darling. I know how much you suffered." My mother stroked my hair gently, her own tears soaking my collar. "But that nightmare is over forever. You are free now. Nobody will ever be allowed to hurt you or degrade you ever again. We are right here with you." "That's right," my father added, wrapping his strong arms around both of us. "This is your safe harbor, Karen. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders anymore. Take your time, rest your spirit, and start living for yourself again." Surrounded by the warmth of my parents' embrace, the accumulated trauma, the daily anxiety, and the sharp emotional wounds of the past decade were slowly washed away by my tears. That evening, the three of us sat down together around the dining table. The food was incredibly rich, flavorful, and deeply comforting. It was a universe away from the tense, silent dinners I used to endure in Queens, where I chewed my food in dread, constantly monitoring Landon's temper to ensure I didn't trigger a verbal explosion. Tonight, our table was filled with genuine laughter, warm conversation, and peaceful silence. We didn't mention Landon's name once. He belonged to a dead past. Instead, we talked excitedly about our future. Where should we go for Thanksgiving? What color should we paint the new guest bedroom? How should we landscape the patio terrace? Those simple, everyday conversations felt like priceless treasures to me. 6 months later, my life had undergone a remarkable transformation. Recognizing my steady leadership and my success in closing major corporate accounts, including the massive contract in Boston, the executive board at my firm promoted me to vice president of account management. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase and an executive bonus package. But more than the money, the validation of my professional worth gave me a profound, unshakable self-confidence. Every dollar I earned now belonged entirely to me. There were no more tyrannical demands for a $3,000 allowance. I opened a high-yield savings account, started an aggressive retirement fund, bought myself a tailored wardrobe that made me feel powerful, and treated my parents to weekend theater getaways in Manhattan. The simple, exquisite freedom of spending the money I worked hard to earn according to my own free will was a daily blessing I never took for granted. Meanwhile, Attorney Pendleton provided me with a final, clinical update regarding Landon's fate. Following his guilty pleas to felony property destruction and criminal trespass, Landon had avoided a state prison sentence only by accepting a rigorous 5-year felony probation agreement, community service, and mandatory restitution orders. However, his financial reality was an inescapable hell. Stripped mind of his assets, disowned by his wealthy mother, and carrying a criminal record that disqualified him from any corporate or office employment, he was completely unemployable in the professional world. To survive and comply with court-ordered restitution payments, Landon was forced to take grueling minimum-wage day labor jobs on construction sites and warehouse loading docks in the outer boroughs. Because his debts to Judge Harrison, my settlement, and his credit card fraud were legally classified as non-dischargeable willful torts, he couldn't declare bankruptcy. Every Friday, the maximum legal percentage of his meager paycheck was automatically garnished by court order before he even saw the money. He was currently living in a dingy basement room in a rundown boarding house in Newark, New Jersey, spending his days lifting heavy boxes and mixing concrete in the freezing cold and scorching heat just to afford basic groceries. The arrogant narcissist who used to sneer that manual labor and ordinary jobs were beneath his elite talent was now spending his life sweating in the dirt, trapped in a financial prison he could never pay off. The curse he had once screamed at me over the phone. "If you get divorced, you'll end up alone and miserable for the rest of your life," had mirrored back onto him with absolute precision. He was living his own prophetic curse, completely isolated, destitute, and forgotten by the world. On a bright sunny weekend in early summer, I treated my parents to a luxury 3-day wine-tasting vacation in Napa Valley, California. Sitting on the open-air cedar deck of a hillside winery, we overlooked rows of lush green grapevines stretching across the rolling valley under a spotless, brilliant blue sky. "Corinne, take a look at that view. It's absolutely breathtaking," my mother said, holding a glass of crisp Chardonnay, a relaxed, joyful smile lighting up her face. "It really is, Mom," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. I have never felt so completely happy and at peace in my entire life. I looked down at my hand resting on the wooden railing. The fingers that had once trembled in fear while dialing a phone in a dark Boston hotel room were now steady, strong, and relaxed. The invisible chains that had dragged me down for 10 years had completely dissolved into the California sunshine. I had my loving parents by my side, a thriving career that challenged and rewarded me, and above all, the absolute strength to stand on my own 2 feet and govern my own destiny. The decade I had lost to Landon's abuse had been a long, painful trial. But the future stretching out in front of me was infinitely wider, brighter, and filled with endless possibilities. I turned my face toward the warm California sun, closed my eyes, and drew a deep, clean, liberating breath of fresh air into my lungs. My new life had officially begun.